Take off that cap and identify yourself. Now! The shout hit the little restaurant like a slap. Forks froze midair. Conversations died in a single breath. Even the espresso machine seemed to pause, as if it knew something ugly had just entered the room. At the corner booth, an old man sat alone with a plain cup of coffee. He wore a faded brown jacket, a simple baseball cap pulled low, and a gray beard that made him look like someone who'd spent more years working than resting. Across from him stood a police officer in a crisp uniform, face tight with anger, finger pointed so close it was almost touching the old man's nose. The old man lifted his eyes slowly. "I'm just having my coffee," he said. His voice was low, steady, firm without trying to be. But the officer wasn't listening. "Don't play dumb," the cop snapped. "That cap, that jacket. You think you can walk into places like this looking like that?" He slapped his palm against the table. "ID. Now." A woman at a nearby table leaned back, startled. Two teenagers near the window already had their phones out, recording. The cashier behind the counter stopped moving entirely, like she was afraid breathing might make her part of it. The old man placed both hands flat on the table. "I didn't do anything wrong," he said. "If you want to see my identification, I'll show you. You don't have to yell." But the cop's expression only hardened. He reached to his belt and yanked his radio free. "Central," he barked. "Need immediate support. Suspect refusing to cooperate." The word suspect landed like poison. The old man blinked once, slowly, like he was trying to decide whether this was real. He opened his mouth to speak again, but the restaurant door slammed open. A second officer walked in. Younger. Tense. Hand already hovering near his handcuffs. He didn't even ask what happened. "Stand up," he ordered. "Slowly. Hands where I can see them." The old man did what he was told. He rose carefully. No sudden moves, no arguing, no drama. Still, the young officer snapped the handcuffs onto his wrists with a rough jerk. Metal against bone. A collective murmur rolled through the room. Someone dropped a mug. It shattered. A woman gasped and covered her mouth. The old man looked down at the cuffs like he couldn't believe they were real. "This is a mistake," he said quietly. "A serious mistake." "Save it," the young cop hissed. "Tell it to the station." The first cop leaned in close. "People like you always think you can talk your way out," he said, voice full of disgust. "Not today." The old man didn't fight. He didn't beg. He just stood there, shoulders a little straighter than you'd expect from someone being treated like a criminal in public. The officers marched him out. Outside, sirens were approaching. The whole thing felt unreal. A quiet old man in a cap and jacket being dragged away like he'd robbed a bank. Inside the squad car, the old man stared out the window at the California streets passing by. Sunny sidewalks, palm trees, people laughing with shopping bags, like he was watching another world. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't demand a phone call. He just waited. At the station, the atmosphere shifted from public spectacle to cold, bureaucratic intimidation. They brought him into interview room B. It was a small, windowless box that smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. The fluorescent lights hummed with a low, headache-inducing buzz. There was a metal table bolted to the floor and 3 chairs. On the wall, a large mirror reflected the scene. Everyone knew it was two-way glass, but nobody acknowledged it. The older officer, whose name tag read Miller, shoved the old man into a chair. "Sit," Miller barked. He didn't uncuff him. The old man sat awkwardly, his hands pressed between his back and the hard plastic of the chair. Miller walked to the other side of the table and opened a laptop. He typed with aggressive, loud strokes, as if he were punishing the keyboard. The younger officer, Gomez, stood by the door, arms crossed, trying to look tough but shifting his weight nervously from foot to foot. "Okay, let's get this over with," Miller said, not looking up. "Name?" The old man sat straight. Despite the handcuffs, despite the faded jacket, he occupied the chair like it was a throne. "Samuel," he said. "Last name?" "Carter." Miller typed it in. "Middle name?" "Joseph." Miller paused. He looked at the old man's face, really looked at him for the first time since the restaurant. He saw the deep lines around the eyes, the scar on the chin that was barely visible under the gray beard. Date of birth? Samuel gave the date. Miller did the mental math. 72? You look older, Sam. That's what a hard life on the streets does to you, huh? Samuel didn't take the bait. I don't live on the streets, officer. Sure, and I'm the mayor. Miller scoffed. Here's how this works. I run your name. If you're clean, maybe we let you go with a citation for disturbing the peace. If you have warrants and guys who dress like you usually do, you're spending the night in the cage. Miller hit the enter key with a flourish. He waited for the local criminal database to load. Usually, it took 3 seconds to spit out a rap sheet. Petty thefts, public intoxication, unpaid tickets. But today the screen didn't show a list. It went blank. Then, a spinning blue circle appeared. Miller frowned. He tapped the refresh key. System's slow, he muttered. Hey, Gomez, is the Wi-Fi down? It was working for booking 5 minutes ago, Gomez replied. Miller looked back at the screen. The circle was still spinning. And spinning. Then, the screen flashed. It turned a deep, solid blue. In the center, a red dialog box appeared. It wasn't the standard police interface. The font was sharp, military grade. Access denied. Miller blinked. What the hell? He tried to close the window. The laptop didn't respond. A second line of text appeared below the first. Clearance level 5 required. Identity logged. Gomez, come look at this, Miller said, his voice losing some of its arrogance. It says access denied. What does identity logged mean? Gomez stepped closer, squinting. I've never seen that code. Is it a glitch? Before Miller could answer, the laptop made a sound, not a beep, a low, rhythmic ping, 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 ping. Then, new text scrolled across the screen, rapid fire. User, Officer D. Miller, badge 4922, action, unauthorized query targeting protected asset. Status, Pentagon Alert triggered. Do not attempt to leave the terminal. Miller pulled his hands away from the keyboard as if it were burning hot. Pentagon? Miller whispered, the color draining from his face. Why does it say Pentagon? He looked up at the old man. Samuel Carter was sitting perfectly still. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't gloating. He was watching Miller with a look of profound, terrifying patience. I think, Samuel said softly, you've triggered a silent alarm, officer. Shut up, Miller snapped, but there was no heat in it. Fear was creeping in, cold and sharp. Miller reached for the landline phone on the desk. I'm calling IT. This piece of junk is broken. He picked up the receiver. There was no dial tone. Instead, there was a voice already on the line. Officer Miller? It wasn't the IT guy. It was a woman's voice, crystal clear, authoritative, and she wasn't calling from the precinct. Miller froze. Who is this? This is Special Agent Holloway, Department of Defense, Cyber Command. Do not hang up this phone. Do not leave the room. Look at the prisoner. Miller's heart hammered against his ribs. He looked at Samuel. I'm looking at him. Is he handcuffed? The voice asked. Yes, standard procedure for... Remove them, the voice ordered. It wasn't a request. It was a command that carried the weight of an airstrike. Immediately. And offer him water. Do not ask him another question. Do not speak to him unless spoken to. We are freezing your precinct's network until the extraction team arrives. Extraction team? Miller's voice squeaked. Lady, he's just a guy in a dirty jacket who wouldn't show ID. Officer Miller, the voice said, dropping an octave. That guy is a designated national asset. If you have bruised him, if you have disrespected him, God help you. Someone is coming to explain. Stay put. Click. The line went dead. Miller slowly lowered the phone. His hand was shaking visibly now. He looked at Gomez. Take them off, Miller whispered. What? Take the cuffs off! Now! Miller yelled, panic breaking through. Gomez jumped, fumbling for his keys. He rushed over to Samuel. Sorry, just doing my job. The cuffs clicked open. The metal fell to the table with a heavy clatter. Samuel rubbed his wrists slowly. The skin was red and indented deeply. He rotated his shoulders, wincing slightly. He looked at Miller. "You're going to want to open the front doors," Samuel said calmly. Miller stared at him, sweat beading on his forehead. "Why?" "Because my wife hates waiting," Samuel said. "And when she's upset, she doesn't knock." 15 minutes passed. Agonizing, silent minutes. Miller stood by the wall, unable to sit. Gomez paced. Samuel just sat there, eyes closed, meditating. Then the phone at the front desk, way down the hall, rang. They could hear it through the door. Then shouting. Then the sound of the precinct's front automatic doors sliding open. But it wasn't the usual sound of the city coming in. It was the sound of chaos. Miller cracked the interview room door open just an inch to peek. The entire station had stopped. Through the hallway, he could see the lobby. 3 massive black SUVs had pulled up onto the sidewalk, blocking the entrance. Men in tactical gear, not SWAT, but something much more expensive, were pouring out, securing the perimeter. Then, a black sedan with diplomatic flags pulled up. The precinct commander, Captain Reynolds, was actually running, from his office toward the lobby, buttoning his jacket, looking like a man who had just been told a nuclear bomb was in the building. The sedan door opened. First, a cane hit the floor. Polished ebony with a silver eagle's head handle. Then, a woman stepped out. She was stunning. Not young, perhaps in her late 60s, but she radiated a power that made the air feel thin. She wore a tailored ivory coat that cost more than Miller made in a year. Her hair was silver, pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. Her eyes were hidden behind dark sunglasses, which she removed slowly as she stepped into the fluorescent light of the police station. Behind her were 2 men in dark suits. They walked with the predatory grace of internal affairs or Secret Service. The woman didn't stop at the reception desk. She walked straight past the security barrier. Captain Reynolds intercepted her, breathless. Ma'am, please, I need to know what—" She didn't even look at him. She kept walking, her heels clicking on the floor like gunshots. "Where is he?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but it vibrated with lethal intent. "Who?" Reynolds stammered. "My husband," she said. "Colonel Carter." Reynolds looked confused. "We don't have a Colonel Carter here. We only have a John Doe vagrant in holding and—" She stopped. She turned to Reynolds. "You have Colonel Samuel Joseph Carter," she articulated every syllable. "And if he is in a cell, Captain, I will have your badge on my desk before sunset." Reynolds turned pale. He looked at the desk sergeant. "Who is in room B?" The guy with the baseball cap," the sergeant whispered. Reynolds closed his eyes for a second, realizing the magnitude of the disaster. "Show me," he ordered. The procession moved down the hallway. The tactical team, the suits, the woman in ivory, and the terrified captain. Miller slammed the interview room door shut and backed away. "They're coming," he whispered to Gomez. "Oh God, they're coming." The door handle turned. The door swung open. Captain Reynolds stepped in first. He took one look at Samuel sitting at the table, rubbing his wrists. And then the unthinkable happened. The captain, the man who ran the district with an iron fist, dropped to one knee on the dirty linoleum, head bowed. "Colonel Carter," Reynolds choked out. "Sir, it is an honor, and a profound apology." The room froze. Outside the glass, officers were gathering, staring in disbelief. Miller's mouth hung open. Gomez looked like he was about to faint. The woman in the ivory coat stepped past the kneeling captain. Her expression wasn't panic. It was fury, quiet, cold, and absolutely terrifying. She looked at Samuel. Her eyes softened for a fraction of a second as she scanned him for injuries. She saw the red marks on his wrists. Her jaw tightened. Samuel looked at the captain. "Get up, Reynolds," he said gently. "Your knees are too bad for theatrics." Reynolds rose, shaky. "Sir, I had no idea. If dispatch had known you were in the sector." "I didn't want a parade, Reynolds. I wanted a coffee." Samuel stood up. The woman, Evelyn Carter, stepped forward. She didn't hug him. Not yet. She turned her gaze to the corner of the room, to Miller. "My name is Evelyn Carter," she said. Her voice filled the small room. "And I want to know which one of you decided my husband was a threat because he was wearing a baseball cap." Miller tried to speak. His throat clicked dry. "Ma'am, we don't," she cut him off. "Don't you dare use the word we. A decision was made. A specific personal decision to humiliate a man who was sitting quietly." The commander held up a hand. One of the suited men stepped forward. He held a tablet device. He didn't look like a cop. He looked like the kind of person who erased people from existence. "Internal Affairs Liaison, Federal Division," the man said. He tapped the screen and projected a hologram-like display onto the wall. "Officer Miller," the agent said, "since your system crashed, allow me to read you the file you were too incompetent to access." The agent scrolled. "Colonel Samuel Carter, United States Special Operations Command. Retired." Miller's knees actually knocked together. "Vietnam, 2 tours, prisoner of war for 6 months, escaped, carrying a wounded comrade for 40 miles. The agent scrolled again. "Panama, Desert Storm, consultant for the Joint Chiefs on asymmetrical warfare. He holds the Silver Star, the Navy Cross, and the Medal of Freedom." The agent looked up. His eyes were cold. 3 years ago, Colonel Carter negotiated the release of 4 missionaries in a hostile zone without firing a shot. He is a Tier 1 national asset. He has saved more lives than this entire precinct combined. The agent turned the screen off. "And you," the agent said to Miller, "arrested him for looking suspicious." Miller looked at the floor. "I didn't know." Evelyn Carter took a step closer to him. She invaded his personal space. She smelled of lavender and steel. "That," she whispered, "is the crime. You didn't know, and you didn't care to find out. You saw a jacket. You saw a cap. You saw age, and you decided you had permission to be cruel." She pointed to the cuffs on the table. "You put those on hands that have dug children out of earthquake rubble. You put those on hands that have signed peace treaties." She turned to Captain Reynolds. "Do you understand what has happened here, Captain?" Reynolds nodded stiffly. "Yes, ma'am, I do." He turned to Miller and Gomez. His face was hard. "Officer Miller, Officer Gomez." "Sir," Gomez whimpered. "Badge and gun, on the table, now." "Captain, please," Miller begged, tears forming in his eyes. "It was a mistake. I followed protocol for a non-compliant suspect. I can write an apology. I can take a suspension." "You lied on the radio," Reynolds snapped. "You called him non-compliant. The dash cam audio from your arrival, which my team just reviewed, shows a man sitting quietly offering to show ID. You escalated, you abused authority, and you picked the wrong man to do it to. Badge and gun." With trembling hands, Miller unholstered his weapon. He unclipped the badge he had polished that morning. He placed them on the table next to the empty coffee cup. Gomez did the same, crying silently. "You are suspended without pay pending a federal civil rights inquiry," Reynolds announced. "Get out of my station." 2 tactical officers stepped forward and escorted the disgraced cops out. They walked past the window, past the staring eyes of their colleagues. The arrogance was gone. The power was stripped away. They were just 2 men who had forgotten who they served. The room fell silent. Samuel picked up his baseball cap from the table. He dusted it off with a slow, deliberate motion. He placed it back on his head. He looked at Reynolds. "Don't destroy them, Reynolds. Just teach them. If they can't learn, then fire them. But hate doesn't fix hate." "Understood, sir." Samuel turned to Evelyn. "Hello, Evie?" He smiled, the first genuine smile of the day. "Hello, Sam," she sighed, the tension finally leaving her shoulders. She took his hand. "I was in the middle of a fundraiser. You owe me a very expensive dinner." "I was thinking we could go back to the diner," Samuel teased. "I never finished my coffee." "Absolutely not," she said, steering him toward the door. "We are going somewhere where the waiters wear ties and nobody yells." They walked out of the interview room together. As they entered the main bullpen, Something happened that wasn't in the regulations. Captain Reynolds shouted, "Room! 10 hut!" Every single officer in the building, 50 of them, jumped to their feet. They stood at attention. As the old man in the faded jacket and the baseball cap walked toward the exit, 50 hands snapped up in a crisp salute. Samuel didn't stop. He didn't gloat. He just tapped the brim of his cap in acknowledgement. They walked out into the California sunshine. The black SUVs waited. The world kept turning. But inside the black sedan, as the convoy pulled away from the station, the silence returned. This time, it was a warm silence. Evelyn poured a drink from the car's small bar and handed it to Samuel. She watched him rubbing his wrists again. "Sam," she said softly. "Yes, Evie." "Why?" she asked. "Why do you wear that jacket? Why that specific cap? You have closets full of suits. You have medals you could wear. Why do you go out looking like a ghost?" Samuel took a sip of the drink. He looked out the tinted window at the city passing by. "Because of Danny," he said. Evelyn went quiet. "Danny gave me this jacket," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. 40 years ago, in a jungle where it rained for 30 days straight. He was shivering. He had malaria. But he gave me his dry jacket because he knew I had to go on watch. Samuel touched the faded fabric of the sleeve. "He died 2 days later, Evie. He never came home. He never got to grow old. He never got to be called Sir or Grandpa. He died in the mud, wearing a wet t-shirt so I could be warm." Evelyn reached out and touched his hand. "And the cap?" she whispered. "I found it in the rubble of the embassy bombing in '98, Samuel said. "It belonged to the security guard who held the door open for the civilians. He didn't make it out either." Samuel turned to look at his wife. His eyes were wet. "I wear these clothes once a year, on the anniversary of the day Danny died. I walk through the city. I sit in cheap diners. I drink simple coffee." "Why?" Evelyn asked, a tear rolling down her cheek. "To remember," Samuel said. "To remember that the only difference between me and the homeless man on the corner is luck. To remember that underneath the medals and the rank, I'm just a man who survived when better men didn't." He looked down at his hands, the hands the young officer had handcuffed so carelessly. "Officer Miller saw a jacket and saw trash," Samuel said. "But when I wear this jacket, I feel like I'm standing next to kings." Evelyn squeezed his hand. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You're a good man, Samuel Carter." "I'm just a lucky one," he replied. The car drove on, disappearing into the traffic of the busy city. Back at the station, Miller and Gomez stood on the sidewalk, stripped of their badges, holding cardboard boxes with their personal belongings. They watched the convoy fade into the distance. They were alone. They were civilians now. And for the first time in a long time, they felt what it was like to be small. And now I ask you, what would you do if you saw this happening in a restaurant? Would you have the courage to speak up? Would you record it? Or would you turn away? The Colonel taught us a lesson today that is worth more than any medal. Authority isn't about how loud you can shout. It isn't about the badge on your chest. It's about character. You never know who you are talking to. You never know what battles they have fought. The person you ignore today might be the only one who can save you tomorrow. So the next time you see someone in a faded jacket, don't judge the book by its cover. There might be a hero inside. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who needs to be reminded that respect is the minimum.